Hey, good morning, everyone. Special edition of the New Marketing Podcast. I'm about to do a Zoom session with an entrepreneur class for a local university, and I'm going to let you listen in on the conversation. So here we go. Going to hit start on the Zoom.
Welcome to the Golden Group Neo Marketing Podcast, a bi-weekly discussion of best practices, latest trends, and modern techniques for professional business communication, including advertising, marketing, digital channels, social media, public relations, and alternative options.
I started my first business when I was 15. I didn't know what it meant to be an entrepreneur or being entrepreneurial, but I'd started a business out of necessity. Basically, I was at that time playing in a band, and I didn't rehearse enough, and I got kicked out of the band. And I said, "What can I do to still be in the band?" And they said, "Do you know how to run sound? Do the board with all the levels?" And I said, "Sure." And I didn't. It was an ultimate fake it till you make it. So I took the equipment home, figured out how to use it, came back and started doing things for that band. Their friends and other high school garage bands were like, "Can you come do that for us?" And the thing about being in a garage band is you don't make any money when you're young and no one knows who you are, but you got to pay the sound guy to show up with the stuff and make it work. So for all through high school, I was doing gigs for bands, and I was typically the only one getting paid. So I wasn't in a band, but I was making money. So it sort of made me happy in that way. So flash forward now about 25 years after that, when I started this business. So the Golden Group is the business that I run now, one of the businesses that I run now. I'm invested in a couple of others at the same time. But in 2011, I left my last corporate job to start the Golden Group. It's a consulting firm. We do PR, marketing, business strategy, trying to not exactly be an ad agency, not exactly be a PR firm, but be something more in the lines of business process development and strategy, trying to play a different role in the market, because there are already lots and lots of great advertising agencies, PR firms, sales organizations, and we didn't want to be that, and we needed to create something different in the market. So that's how the Golden Group got started, which is my existing business. And I work with small businesses, startups, large corporate business, and entrepreneurs. And so that's one of the reasons. That's how I met Rob. And that's how we have a lot of these conversations about entrepreneurism. I have a podcast, business podcast. It's all about business things with marketing communication. I have a personal podcast. It's more of a motivational hustle and grind type podcast. But at the end of the day, all of this goes back to working with and serving entrepreneurs, people who start businesses, people who run businesses, people who employ people, and all of the value for the people involved, your local city, state, and even and the nation as a whole benefits from having small businesses available. So that's the long and the short. That's how I got started. That's sort of my motivation. I've always kind of been that guy, even when I didn't realize what being an entrepreneur was. But I always sort of had my own drive to do my own thing. I'm also really bad at sort of playing by the rules and following along. And so I could have a job and not really do what I was told, or be unhappy about it, or try to change the system and lose that job. Or I could do this and find a way to sort of take my natural aptitude and my natural talents and use it in a more productive way than pissing off my boss in my corporate job. This is pretty much a definition of January, February 2021, right? We've had all of 2020. We're all dealing with COVID. We're all doing Zoom and things like this. But now, of course, we have a snowstorm. It's the coldest day on record in Oklahoma, possibly ever. So it all kind of piles up on us. This is a great example of what running a business is all about. Every day you have a plan. You put the best structure and the best tools into place, and then reality kind of smacks you in the face. Sometimes it's great, like something happens way better than you expected, and sometimes, rolling blackouts shut you down. I'm really hoping we get through this conversation without the power dropping in the whole building, and the Wi-Fi will go away, and all of this will go away at the same time.
Yep. That's actually a good segue to my next question. So we've been talking a lot about failures and how you deal with failures and how you're not really trained to deal with failures. So Can you talk about kind of how you address those and maybe an example of how you've overcome some?
I definitely, when I was younger, I definitely was one of those sort of like win at all cost. I hate to lose. I was super competitive, which is good. It's good to be competitive and have that drive as an entrepreneur, as a business owner. But you have to allow yourself the room to fail, because ultimately you will fail and you learn more lessons from failures than you do successes. Everyone wants to be successful, and ultimately, kind of in the grand scheme of, is it 50-50, 60-40, 70-30, you want to have more successes than failures. But the real lessons come from failures, and I don't even like to use the term failure. I say setback. Something's not a failure unless that thing stops you from doing what you were trying to do. So if you have a setback that is big enough where you say, I'm not going to pursue that anymore, well, that's a failure, because now you've quit and you moved on to something else. But running a business, being an entrepreneur, crafting a career, anything that you're pursuing, there's the one step forward, two steps back is very typical. It happens a lot. And how you take the two steps back and learn the lesson of what went wrong that you could change or do better or different the next time, that allows you to move forward the next step and the next step. It's getting the mindset of understanding the lessons learned from setbacks. Now, the goal isn't to have a failure. The goal isn't to have a setback. You don't want things to go poorly, but you have to understand it does. And it's not because it's you. It happens to everyone. Another piece of advice I give people all the time is, you're going to hear 100 no's for every one yes. So if you're trying to sell something, if you're trying to get someone to be a partner, if you're going to try to get a better job, if you're going to try to get a promotion at the job you have now, you're going to hear so many more no's than yeses. And it's not you, it's the system. It just is what it is, and it happens to all of us. But what you can learn from every no, what you can learn from every setback, what you can learn from every situation that doesn't go as expected, best case scenario is it goes so much better than you expected. You still have to figure out what you didn't understand going in to do it that way again the next time. But you also have to understand, when things don't go as well as expected in a bad way, you have to learn the lesson so you don't repeat that mistake. And this is the key when you talk about failure or setbacks, is not repeating the same setbacks over and over and over again, because that's where you lead to ultimate failure, because you can't get past them. So negative things that happen, setbacks, mistakes, just things not going as expected. There's a valuable lesson in that every single time, if you're willing to look for it and find it and then put that back into your process. The worst thing that can happen is when someone says, I know what I'm doing, I'm absolutely right now, and no matter what happens, I'm not changing. That's the ultimate road to failure. Because even if your first initial ideas are right, even if the plan is working, even if success is happening, if you're like on a rocket, something will change to a point where it won't be going the same way. And having the idea or the ability to get this is only part of it. The adaptation to what happens around you is where people go from being good to being great. And a lot of people can make a lot of money here, and because they won't change, that they could be making 10 times that if they would just make some changes. And those changes, those lessons of change, almost always come from setbacks or what you would call failure. So you don't want to embrace failure. I often, too many people, especially on social media, they get like, fail, failing is great. Failure teaches something, and it does teach you lessons. But you don't want to start every day with, I can't wait to fail today, obviously. But you can start every day with, things are going to go right, things are going to go wrong. Everything that happens will teach me what my business should be doing, what I should be doing in my role, what everything that led up to that. And good or bad, I'm going to have lessons from it. I'm going to be different tomorrow. So it's not about being better or winning. It's about being different by growing, by developing, because you learn something through the process.
I like that distinction between failure and setback.
Yes. Yeah, like I said, I think you need to define that in yourself as, I'm in a conversation with a potential client right now. We've gone back and forth, this, that, can you do this for us? What do you think? And he's trying to fill me out. I'm trying to provide him some information. He wants to make the best deal he can. I want to make the best deal I can. We're trying to meet in the middle. And at some point, he may just say, I'm going to go with someone else. Okay, that's fine. It's not the end of the world. I have other clients. I like this client. But if that happens, I have to figure out where I pushed, where did I go wrong? Where did I push too far? Where did I not give enough information? What could I have done better? So the next time I'm at this spot where like I've negotiated all the way down, I think I'm ready to close. How do I close better? Whatever happens in this situation with this client is going to inform me what to do next time. And it's gotten to the point now, there's a lot of conversations I have with a lot of people, like, especially startups or young entrepreneurs, or they're really trying to fill me out because they're trying to learn the whole thing. And I'm already at like step 8. I'm like, I know how this goes. I've done this over and over again because I pay attention to what works and what doesn't. And, of the 10 years we've been in business, we average about 10 to 12 clients a year. On a busy year, we've had around 20. Low years, we've had 3 or 4. This last year, we were around 5 to 7, which was very intentional because of COVID and what we were trying to provide. We let some of our clients go for their benefit so that they weren't spending money with us, but in places they needed to. And so collectively, maybe we've had 100, 150 clients, maybe 200 clients over 10 years. Every single one of them has taught me something. Every single one of them came to us with a different situation, different needs, different asks, different things we provided for them. And every one of them I learned great lessons of. This worked and it made them happy, and it created a relationship we could move forward with. And every one of them also, like, I tried to do this and it didn't make them happy and we didn't get that relationship to move forward. But for that 150 people or clients we've worked with in 10 years, there's probably 1,000 that came across my radar screen that was like, maybe this is a potential client or someone we could work with or someone we could have a business relationship with, and it didn't happen. So it's that 10 to 1. If you think about 10 to 1, if you think about it, you're going to 100 no's to 1 yes, then you don't get hung up on, is that 50 no's or 62 or 71? You just focus on that 1 yes. Because that's all that matters, is getting the right yes.
What's interesting is Kyle comes from a marketing background. I come from a sales background, which those two departments are always conflicting.
Yeah.
But it's still interesting that we have the exact same story. When I was in sales, I made 100 phone calls a day. Of those 100 phone calls, I probably got one person to continue the conversation on. So at the end of the week, I had 5 people that I was continuing the conversation on. And of those 5, probably one of them was going to buy. So right. It's always a constant grind.
It's always constantly working and developing and understanding your craft, understanding your pitch, understanding your product. The feedback. Is the price too high? Can I not get it fast enough? Can I get it delivered a different way? Is it coming red? Whatever they ask for, where they say, I'm not buying today because of this. Sometimes it's on them, but sometimes it's on you to say, that's a valid point, Or if I've heard our price is too high enough from really good prospects, I have to work with the team to figure out if our price is right or not. And that's that paying attention to the failure, the no's because your price is too high. 1 or 2 times is no big deal, but 50 out of 100 calls as your price is too high. You got to go back internally to the business and say, what do we have to do to change that price or create more value or do something so that the idea of our price is too high changes, because that's the feedback from the real world.
So we've been talking a lot recently about target markets and how to identify them and how to keep up with your potential client. What advice would you have to somebody just starting that out?
Ironically, this is kind of what I'm working with that client I just told you. Maybe we'll work together, maybe we won't. It's a coffee company. So he started off with like, everyone who drinks coffee is my client. And I just, it broke my heart. Like, no. And, I love coffee. I'm a huge coffee drinker, but I don't like every type of coffee out there. And I don't like every brand. And there are certain brands that appeal to me for different reasons. And so probably the number one mistake you can make when trying to develop audience is try to go too wide. Everyone is not your client. All right. It doesn't matter. Coca-Cola, Snickers, McDonald's. It's still everyone is not their client. There are people who are never going to McDonald's because it's too lowbrow, and there are people who are never going to go to McDonald's because they think the food sucks. And there are people that are going to go because it's convenient, because the price is good, and then you get people who really like the food, and you get right down into it. fits for their lifestyle, who they are, how they live their life, what their concerns are about calories and intake and things versus speed versus price, etc. And when you get really down to who that real audience is, who is 9 times out of 10 going to pick you if you're McDonald's over Wendy's or a sit-down meal or cooking at home, that's where you start. And then you 1 degree left and 1 degree right, you move out from there to other potential audiences. You don't get, teenagers who are more concerned with speed than calories. If that's your target audience, you don't then get to go to people who work in high-rise buildings and drive Mercedes, because there's too much of a gap there and there's no correlation. But if you get teenagers, then you can get people in their early 20s. Then you can get people in their mid-20s. If you get people who are more concerned about speed than price, then maybe you can get people who are more concerned about convenience than price, etc. So you have to start as focused as possible and then work your way center out. And too many people either try to get everyone. I want everyone to be my client. That's a failure, because if you try to be everything to everyone, you'll be nothing to anyone. Or they try to be super random and like, it'd be cool to get skateboarders. It'd be cool to get rock musicians. It'd be cool to get rappers. It'd be cool to get, it's too disjointed. Start very focused. Figure out who that audience is who's going to say yes to you more often than not, and then work out from there based on what they tell you, the feedback they give you. It goes back to the real world feedback.
So I know you guys had some questions. Is there anybody that have any questions?
Everybody has to ask a question. No slacking, you guys. Come on.
So I have a question. My question is, what kind of challenges do you face in reaching or engaging with customers?
I think probably the number one challenge in general right now is too much noise. 6,000 TV stations, streaming internet, social media, mobile devices. There's so much noise in the world right now, and so many people trying to get your attention, that if I need your attention, it's much harder for me to get in front of you. For me personally, because my business, we work directly with business owners, CEOs, and people who are investing in startups. So my audience is already like, we go from everybody to business people to startup to a really select group of people who are really focused on doing something really specific for their business. So for me, I'm super tight in who I'm trying to get in front of. And if I miss them or I get in front of them in the wrong way, that opportunity is completely gone. So kind of two ends of the spectrum there is, when your focus is really narrow, you have to be very precise and very consistent in your attempts, because you're only going to get so many chances to actually put that message in front of the right audience. And if you're trying to go for more of a mass appeal and trying to appeal to more people, or trying to figure out who your audience really is, trying to figure out how you cut through the noise. And a lot of people kind of give you an all-in approach. Like, we're going to be on every social media channel. We're going to have a website. We're going to do email. We're going to do radio. We're going to do TV. We're going to do print. And that's fine if you got $100 million to go blow. I don't think anyone in this call has $100 million. I'm just guessing, but you're college kids, so I'm assuming you're not having $100 million. I don't have that kind of money to blow. So understanding who your audience is to a point, to try to select just a few channels to try to get a very specific message to them very consistently is the key to success, and the inability to do that is the biggest hurdle. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. It does. Cool. Thanks a lot.
Who's somebody you think is doing a really good job of that right now?
Oh, that's a great question. Because ironically, typically right after the Super Bowl, there's a lot of like who did great and who didn't with the Super Bowl. And a lot of people will tell you $5 million for a 30-second Super Bowl ad sounds insane, unless you're Anheuser-Busch and Budweiser, and you run a $2 billion a year company. It's not that insane because the amount of attention on the Super Bowl. Actually have really been entertained and kind of give a gold star to a lot of the fast food companies right now, the way they're using social media. Wendy's is great on social media. I think you remember a few years ago, the Super Bowl with Oreos kind of jumped in on social media when they had the blackout at the Super Bowl. some organic things like that kind of play off current events. I'm seeing some brands do a really good job with that. It can be tricky getting current events, especially, election year and COVID and all the kind of just chaos that comes with those topics you kind of want to stay away from. But I'm seeing a lot of brands try to be playful and fun, and it makes sense for their brand. Fast food should be fun. Alcoholic beverages should be fun, but your lawyer should not be fun. And in fact, I'll give you an example of someone who I think is poor, and I won't mention who they are. You wouldn't know them anyways. But on LinkedIn, there is an attorney and she is, I'm going to assume, 60. And she, when you look at it, you would say, oh, it's maybe someone's mother, maybe a grandmother. And she does TikTok videos, the little TikTok dances that everyone's doing with the current song. And then at the end of it sort of is like, and I'll be your lawyer or something along. She kind of makes it lawyer TikTok. And if you're a social media influencer, or if you're a brand that's fun, if you're a nightclub, if you're a beer brand and you want to do TikTok and have fun videos, great. Lawyers should not have fun TikTok videos, right? Because it doesn't make sense for their brand voice. It doesn't make me trust this lawyer, and you need trust in a lawyer, a CPA, a doctor. Your doctor should not be doing TikTok videos. Now they can, but they still should be doctorish, So I'm seeing a lot of people jump on trends that get away from their brand voice because they're just so excited about the attention on the trend. So I think more important is to understand your brand voice, understand who your audience is, what your brand represents, and how people see you and how they want to hear from you. I don't want to hear from my lawyer on TikTok. I don't want my lawyer on LinkedIn doing TikTok dances. I want my lawyer talking about what's changing in the laws, what's happening in the world, and how this might affect your business. And if you need more information, you can contact us. I'm perfectly great with that. I don't want to see lawyers doing TikTok dances.
What other questions you guys have?
I have another question, sir.
Go ahead.
What are your most successful marketing strategies?
Successful marketing strategies. We've got a few that have worked out pretty well. I've done a lot of work in restaurant business and events, and traditionally in the past, and this is one of those things, up until 2020, large special events. The restaurant industry was really good about getting people to the restaurant who normally wouldn't go there, or getting people to try the food at maybe in a charity event. And then they go, oh, this food is better than I thought it would be, or like I knew your restaurant was there, but I didn't realize you did this. Especially like here in Oklahoma, we're not really known for seafood. One of my longtime clients was a seafood restaurant, and their seafood was amazing and super fresh. And so many people were like, oh, I don't eat seafood in Oklahoma. It can't be fresh. And so we hosted a lot of public events, some of them where we just gave away food and said, try it. And with the idea that once they tried it, they would be convinced it was fresh, there was high quality, and that they could come to the restaurant and have that expectation. So doing events that were sort of outside the norm of what you would expect for a fine dining restaurant was really effective for us. One of the tactics that was really effective for us. Another thing we did for that same restaurant is their flagship product. We sort of we personified it. We created a Twitter account and a LinkedIn and not LinkedIn, but an Instagram account for their crab cake, and it had its own voice, and it would tell you all kinds of cool stuff, and it was fun, and it talked about what his favorite band was and told dad jokes and stuff like this. And so it got people off the idea of it was maybe an expensive item or something that they didn't like, and it made them sort of be curious about it, and a lot more people were coming into the restaurant asking for that dish and mentioning, it caught me on social media, and I thought it was interesting. So that's a great example where brand voice works really well in certain channels, but it's a combination of brand voice, the audience, the channel, etc. But I think the ultimate answer to your question is sort of every single business has to figure out what that thing is that's going to work, that tactic that works best. It starts with strategy. It goes back to understanding who your audience is, what your market is, your position in the market versus your competition, etc. And then being very selective in the one or two or three things you're trying to do on a very regular basis, as opposed to 500 things that you're just sort of throwing it out there. So the key is going back to focus, drilling down to your audience, and doing things that make sense for your business, for your brand, and for your consumer. You can be a little unexpected. You can take some risk as long as you're kind of in that vein. Don't be a lawyer doing TikTok dances, but you can be a restaurant doing fun things, and so make sure it just fits your brand voice.
What's a good, other than coronavirus, what is a good interpretation of just having a great random pressure just applied, and you have to think as quick as possible to stay on your feet?
I think today's a great example. Weather is always a thing that is unexpected, even when we all saw this storm coming, but how it plays out. Last summer when there were a lot of protests, and then some of those protests turned into riots and became dangerous. A lot of brands wanted to support the ideas behind the protests, behind Black Lives Matter and behind equality and things of that nature, and which is a good thing for brands to do if they're authentic. Jumping on an idea like, oh yeah, we're into that just because it's maybe getting a lot of media attention is a bad idea. But if it's something that they've been doing internally and working with their partners, working with their employees on ideas like this beforehand, and so then to come out and say we'd also like to put our brand behind these ideas is often a good idea. But sometimes when those protests turn violent or criminal actions happened around them, and maybe some people don't see it as completely positive, it can make your brand need to contract back from that. So there's pros and cons to be involved in social issues as a brand or as a business. But sometimes well-intended, we want to do this because we believe in high ideas like equality and justice, can break down into the news story becomes very specific on maybe one single violent act or an action in a city that has things kind of turn sideways. And so often the best ideas do kind of come back to that didn't go as expected, and you have to be able to adapt along the way. So I think this summer there was a lot of that around some of the social justice issues. Politics is always, I try to tell all my clients to stay out of politics. I mean, you should consider 50% of your potential audience is on one side and 50% is on the other side. And you want to serve everyone. You don't want to turn anyone away or turn anyone off with politics. Some people who own businesses want to put their personal opinion in it and move forward with their idea of what politics should be, and that's fine. They own the business, but that can blow back on you too, because you can't control what other people say that sort of are associated with an idea or a political party or things like that.
On the something funny, I actually just saw this meme yesterday that has like something exactly to do with what you just said. Talks about publicity is the circus with all the animals going down Main Street, and public relations is the people following them with the brooms and
Right. Yeah, it sounds like a great idea to have a parade for the people. They'll love it. Then you're going to trash their street, and they're not happy with you. So it's called unintended consequences. Sometimes you intend to do things well, and it creates unintended consequences, and you always have to be prepared for that, and you're responsible for it. If you do something, you hope it goes well, it doesn't, you got to make it up. You got to fix it, or your business will be reflected poorly for a very long time.
I had another question. It's kind of like goes way off topic, or actually not really, but how do you think like population growth or just the growth of like a generation into like my generation to the age of like where we're finally like getting to be higher level ed in college, and we are starting to look forward to what we're going to do in the future. Like there's a lot of people that have very innovative ideas in my generation, and I feel like eventually like my generation then after, and then like within those years, like there's just going to be an oversaturation of everything and a lot of markets. And how do you think the oversaturation is going to affect marketing in general? in the job market for it?
I think most marketing professionals have been going down the path of personalization and sort of small niche marketing for a long time now anyways, just because of we have more communication channels, etc. I think that's going to continue, but probably super accelerate with post-COVID and then how people are reacting to that. I think the job markets themselves are changing now that people do understand you can work for a Silicon Valley company, but be in Oklahoma or Texas or Chicago because you can work like this remotely. That's going to affect how business operates, I think, going into the future. And as we continue to kind of splinter and divide up our communication channels, figuring out which channels to get in front of and be effective at is going to be the challenge for marketers moving forward. Ultimately, as far as an overcrowded market, the market will correct itself. If there's 500 dating apps, 490 of them are going to fail, and 10 of them will have enough staying power to last. And if there's 6,000 delivery services, majority of them will fail, and the ones who do it well and get it right will continue on. Just the market always corrects itself like that. It just is what it is, and it's the nature of business. So that's why your business always has to be improving, learning, and getting better, because you're always competing for those limited number of spots. It definitely is, and it's also what the difference between marketing and advertising. Marketing is the work before advertising happens, and advertising is the outward expression of your marketing. And a lot of people confuse those two terms a little bit. Back in the day, Mad Men style, right? You come up with a catchy jingle and you put it on TV and radio, and people bought it or they didn't because they had 3 TV stations, 2 radio stations, 1 newspaper. You knew exactly how to get in front of almost everyone. And all you had to do was catch their attention. And it was also, if you had a restaurant, there was 4 restaurants in your town, not 400. And if you had a shopping mall or a shopping store, there were 2 or 3 of them instead of 300. And no one was bordering online. And so the competition was narrow and the channels were wide, and people were sort of forced to well, it's got to be this or this because that's all we have. Well, that's not the case today. And so that's why with market segmentation, you have to be so much more specific in who you market to and who your actual audience is, because no one is forced to choose A or B because there's A through Z in options. So, I kind of mentioned marketing and advertising are different. So again, marketing is the work you do before you actually start advertising and communicating. Marketing is research. It's data analysis. It's positioning. It's creating a strategy. It's developing your brand voice. It is doing all of this work before you ever go out in the world and say, hey, here's who we are as a brand. Once you start doing that, essentially advertising is paid placement, running ads, whether it's digital or traditional in print or on TV, radio, etc. Pre-rolls on videos, all those things that are ads, that are created ads with a call to action, all those things, which is what you would think about when you think about Mad Men and a kind of traditional style of marketing and advertising. But it's more important to do the marketing work first, to understand who your audience is, what your message is, the best way to connect with them, and the best way to convert them, to get them to a conversion process, to them say, I'm going to buy this product, or I'm going to sign up for this service, or I'm going to do what I need them to do. If you understand all that first, what is the jingle, or what picture do we use, or do we use video, or do we use audio, or all of those questions become really easy to answer if you have done the marketing work of understanding how to best connect with your best, most likely to purchase audience. And so for me, that's always more important. And one of the reasons I didn't want to have an ad agency, and I come from the creative side of things, but the idea of hi, Mr. Coffee Company, I think, you need to have a big giant dancing coffee cup that sings a little song that goes, wake up, and whatever it is. That pitch is fine, but I'm more interested in what's actually going to work, what's going to make people create the purchase, what's going to create economic value for the client. Because if you don't sell anything, it doesn't matter how great your advertising is. You could have the best, coolest ads. Think of the best commercial you've ever seen, anything like that. If it doesn't get people to purchase, it's irrelevant. If it doesn't get people to appreciate your brand and want to purchase and eventually purchase, it doesn't matter. So creative, people put too much emphasis on creative for a long time. That's the Mad Men thing, right? The whole point of watching Mad Men was to figure out Don Draper was going to pull it out. I know what we'll do. And he just pulled some idea out of the air. That's not reality. That's not how the world works. Lad, let's try this. Doesn't work because everything you try, you spend time and money on. And it goes back to unless someone's got $100 million to burn, none of us have time and money to waste. On a startup, on a small business, on a corporate, anything like that, no one has time and money to waste. So you have to do the work, do the research, do the data analysis, really define what everything is and how it should be done before you get into execution. And that's where you get into your advertising. Now, PR is the opposite of advertising. It's not paid media, it's earned media. It's having something newsworthy or something that the community would want to know about in order to get placement in a publication or some other sort of journalism scenario. So a lot of people tried to go the PR route of just call the local TV station, call the local newspaper and tell them to come down to my business and talk about my business. Well, that's not PR, and that's not what journalists are supposed to do. But if you pitch an event that's happening at your business for a charity or for a community group or for a local school or for something that's not you selling the thing you sell at your business, then the media might show up, they might cover that event, and they might accidentally talk about the fact that you sell the thing that you sell. That's earned media, that's PR. Too many people try to force PR, let's get our name on TV. You have to get your name on TV in the right way. People often, if they read about your business doing something good in the community or providing a service above and beyond, etc., they develop a better idea about you. They like you as the people behind the business, which is great value. So don't ruin that by trying to immediately try to sell them something. So advertising and PR are two aspects of outward communication, but neither one of them should happen until you've done your marketing work.
I guess, what are 3 skills you think you must have in order to be successful in this industry?
Great question.
Marketing in particular or in entrepreneurship?
Both. 3 of each.
I think I probably could come up with 3 that cover both. Number 1, thick skin. You gotta be armor plated. It goes back to the idea 99 no's to 1 yes, right? You're going to hear no's. You're going to have people not like what you're trying to do. They're going to fight you on it for silly reasons, for their own personal BS, whatever. So especially if you're trying to do something new, if you're trying to be disruptive, if you're trying to bring something, new to the game or change things, you're going to meet a lot more resistance than you are acceptance. And so you have to have a thick skin. It's not personal. Rob and I could talk about 10 different business models, and I could tell him 9 out of 10 won't work and this one will. It doesn't mean because you liked one of the other ones, you're an idiot. It just means the situation is the situation. And so having thick skin is absolutely number 1. I guarantee you there are a lot of people who try to do what I do, don't now because they didn't have thick enough skin. They take it too personal, and you just can't do that. The second, 1A to that is not being, I don't know if the word vicious is right, but don't be vicious. Don't make it personal with other people. When you communicate as a professional, as an entrepreneur, definitely if you're in marketing or a professional communicator, tell people what the facts are. Tell people how you made a decision and move on. Don't let anyone feel like they are the dummy in the conversation. That's a bad thing that happens. And some people do. Some people try to elevate themselves by tearing other people down. That's not how it works. You can't have the tallest building by knocking everyone else's building down. You have to build your building, allow them to build theirs. And the idea of rising tide lifts all boats. This is one of the reasons I'm having the conversation with you guys today. I want all of you to become entrepreneurs. I want you to become great marketers. I want you to become great at what you do, because collectively in Oklahoma and maybe in Oklahoma City, we get a better economic situation because we're all doing great things. So giving back and communicating with people and allowing them to be part of the process, allowing them, even when they fail, to fail in a way that they can learn something, that's all an aspect of having a thick skin and sort of being a professional about your approach to business relationships, because business is built on relationships. And if you can't build relationships, you at least don't burn that bridge or never create an opportunity to pick up a relationship because you're too harsh on someone. So people will tell you no, take it, move on. When you have to tell other people no, don't be intentionally harsh about it. Try to be constructive in that as well, because it just benefits everyone. Skill number 2, open mind. I've told you many times today, and having to jump on 2 different Zoom calls is a great example of you got to adapt. You got to be quick. Things are going to happen that are not ideal. And if you get stuck in, man, I didn't get to open this presentation and I didn't get to give my pitch and I wasn't looking perfect. And then we had the technical thing and then I couldn't get in because I had to they had to wait on me. If you get caught up in that, you'll never try anything, you'll never do anything, and you'll never be successful. But it happened. Let's all talk about it. Let's all learn from it. Let's get better from it. We're still having a great conversation. Everyone's going to get value out of this. Like finding the bright side in that. So having that attitude of open-mindedness and not being constrained, and it has to be this way or it sucks. That will help you be adaptable, be flexible, and make all those changes. Learn from your mistakes that we've been talking about all morning. Number three, skill. Probably a little bit of number 2, but I'm going to say it anyways. Listening. You should listen more than you speak. And it's funny because I'm the one speaking today, but that's what I'm supposed to be doing. But feedback from others is just crucial to success. And too many people sort of speak in order to press others into their way of thinking, when you should be speaking to create a conversation. One of the things I say a lot, Rob probably gets sick of hearing me say this, is marketing is a 2-way conversation. A lot of people try to use their marketing to force messages or force ideas into people. Like, I'm going to force people to buy this because I've used my marketing tools to make a sale. It's not really what you're trying to do. You're trying to create a conversation, create a relationship, and then make them comfortable with making a purchase from you. You do that by listening to them. You present what you're doing and what it is that you have, but what they want from the relationship, how they want to purchase it, how they would repeat the purchase, how they would move forward, etc. All of that comes from you listening and then making those changes and adaptations that we've been talking about all day. So being a good listener is huge. And I could tell you the first half of my career when I was in the music business, I was a terrible listener. I was very aggressive, young, brash. I'm going to change the world. I'm doing it my way. I don't need to learn your lessons. I'm here to make things better. I don't need to hear from some old guy. Well, now that I'm the old guy, I understand what the old guys are trying to tell me. And so I'm much more listening to what potential clients and to what their audience and to everyone around me and to the general public is telling me more often than I'm trying to tell them what they should know. So those are your 3. Good question. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So whenever you do have those setbacks, how are you able to kind of like not necessarily take it personal? Like you mentioned, you have to have a thick skin, but I mean, at some point, especially if you're barely starting, it's going to bother you a little bit.
It's a learned skill. If you think of it like this, think of anything you would want to do in life. I see a guitar behind Rob, right? The first time anyone ever picked up a guitar, they don't know what to do. Right? Eddie Van Halen, may he rest in peace, just recently died, right? He was one of the greatest guitar players of all time. The first day he picked up a guitar, he stunk. He was terrible. But he understood if he practiced, he learned his lessons, that didn't work, this works, etc., etc. He could become better, and he continued up until probably the day he passed. He was still probably learning different things to do on the guitar. having the ability to not take things personal, to move forward with criticism, to keep your open mind, all of that is a learned skill. And if you think of it as practicing, the same way you would practice guitar or piano or shooting a basketball or, crocheting, any skill that you have in life, right? You start terrible. You start as a rookie, but you eventually get where you don't even have to look, right? You're just doing it and it becomes second nature and you don't think about it almost to a point where it's even hard to explain what you're doing. Having an open mind and taking criticism and using it to move yourself forward is a learned skill. And if you practice it every day, if you ingrain it in who you are and you understand, and it's easy for me to say again, I've been running a business for 35 years. It's easy for me today to say, oh yeah, it's just part of who you are. It is hard right now when you haven't done it very much. And the only way you'll get past it is understanding it does get easier and easier and easier. And then it goes from something you can do to something you're good at to a really valuable skill to something that will set you apart from almost everyone else. Can really elevate you to that Eddie Van Halen level of guitar playing if you work on it every single day.
So you're saying I could play Eruption?
Sure. I can play Eruption. It's just not great.
I don't think Eruption is great.
If I play it.
I was about to hit the lead button.
Like all of us can play it. You might even be really good at it. You're never going to be Eddie.
I was going to make a joke when you said when you first started that conversation, you were like, you pick it up and you had to practice. And I was going to ask, what about the Jukebox Hero? Just saw it.
There's the exception to the rule, right? There's always something that happens as a fluke. Something goes viral. These things happen, but you can't base a career on it, and you can't base. It's sort of like winning the lottery. If your career plan is to win the lottery, you're probably going to end up broke and alone. But if your career plan is to educate yourself, to improve yourself, to work on your craft, to continue to get better, and have a continual growth pattern your whole life, then the idea of being successful is really attainable. All right. We have two people who have still to ask questions because we have one who's joined late, but definitely want to get everyone to have a question today. As my phone rings. See? Things just continue to happen.
Okay, I have a question. So, I'm an art major, so, I don't want to do a business or anything, but I want to do advertising and logos and stuff. So how would I get into doing that?
So at the end of the day, after the marketing work is done and the business people understand what their brand stands for, who their audience is, etc., they still have to translate that into something tangible, right? Something visible, which is how you end up with a logo. You also end up with color schemes and all kinds of style behind your marketing that represents who you are and has consistency to it so that your audience can, once they learn about you or you learn about your brand, especially if they make a purchase and they like it and they want to repeat that, you want to be identifiable, right? The Nike swoosh, the Thunder logo, the Coca-Cola can, everything, all those things kind of represent back. I like Coca-Cola when I see that can, or I see the swoosh on the bottle, or I see that red. I know that's them. Pepsi is red and blue. All these things that kind of work in the back of your mind. So for you, at some point, the business people are going to be able to explain this to a certain point, but they can't physically manifest it. But as an artist, you can. And so if I was to say to you, our business is very serious. It's very traditional. It's very structured. And our audience is maybe older and higher income. Right now, you're probably already picturing certain colors and certain shapes that fit that feeling more than if I told you our audience are under 20, they skateboard, they listen to punk rock music, and they surf the internet. You're already now visually picturing something else. As an artist, you have to interpret that and connect these ideas, essentially words, into emotion and a little physical relationship when someone sees the advertising, sees the branding. So your role is to make that translation. There are not enough pure artists in advertising. A lot of, and I have a graphic design background, but I'm an artist as well, and so a lot of people are very mechanical in design. And it has to be mechanical to a point because it has to be reproduced in print and on the screen, etc. But at some point, an artist, someone with some soul behind what their decision making is, has to interpret these ideas and create something visually that will connect with human beings.
Would you go as far to say, like, in that idea, like choosing different color palettes that, like, some of them like give you dopamine when you look at it, or things like that?
Absolutely. Shape, style, color palettes, the amount of colors. If you're trying to represent like something that has a lot of high energy or movement, multiple colors work. Where something that's calm and serene, or maybe very sort of professional, again, going back to like the doctor lawyer thing, less colors, more solid uses of singular or contrasting colors. There's hot colors versus cold colors, right? So hot colors tend to have a little bit more vibrancy to them, and they tend to create more of an excitement in your brain. Cooler colors are a little bit more calming, same thing. And so depending on how you're trying to represent your business, those are some of the combinations. Shapes the same way. Hard lines have a different connotation in your brain than round or soft lines. Things that have less shape to them. Circles and triangles are easy, but clouds and free form creates a different image in your mind, a different connection as well. Today, you have to think about how does it look on a piece of paper or on a business card, but also what does it look on screen? Maybe what does it look like if it's moving or changing or warping? And if you think about like all the logos that come up before a movie, and they spin in, they fly in, they do this, that, and the other. Sometimes they take on the character of the movie itself. And all these things can represent different ideas that ultimately are connected back to your brand. And an artist or someone who understands emotion, color theory, shape, all those things can translate those ideas. That's a good question. I have not had that question in a long time. Ultimately, your ultimate job should be art director, where you're an executive level decision maker, but you're bringing your art background and your knowledge of all of these things to the process.
Okay, I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if I asked a repetitive question. I don't know what we've been over yet, but I'm looking to like sell online courses, or at least start with that right now. What I get stuck on is just getting kind of overwhelmed, or like motivation wise, like I take too long of breaks, I think. What was key for you in like to staying motivated and to not getting caught up in the details? Like, how do you mentally do that, physically do that?
I finally developed a process. I used to be really bad about getting hung up on details. Back when I was a perfectionist and I thought everything had to be exactly my way, I was really bad about that. I also worked 20 hours a day when I was that guy. I still put in the hours now, but not nearly as bad, because I've sort of developed a process. And it actually goes a little bit back to what you would think about for an artist or a writer. Often, I start with rough ideas. I try to start on a notepad. I'd like literally start on like notepads with like really basic ideas. Something hits me in the head, I literally have a notepad in my shower, like in the shower every morning. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. Just a fragment of an idea. I write it down the first time. Then I take it to an actual notepad and I start kind of expanding out on that idea. And then I like to set it down and do something else and come back to it, but sort of do a draft and a first draft and a second draft and etc. And at some point it starts to come together and it starts to make sense. And the moment that happens where you see like, oh, this is how it can end up, and you picture that end piece in your head because you've gotten your second or third draft together, that's when you just stop and just drill down to finish it. And if the third draft doesn't get you there, you got to do a fourth draft. And if the fourth draft, eventually it's going to connect in your brain, and everyone's a little different on this. And this is also another practice skill. Like the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. And I've got now a formula. Like when I get an idea, like I know if I do this, this, and this within this period, I'm going to end up in something that at least looks like I could explain it to someone else. So just develop a process that works for you and your brain. Taking breaks and stepping away from something is a good idea because it allows your brain to reset. Having other people see it, fresh eyes, just give their fresh perspective. A lot of people get real nervous about showing something that's raw. Like it's a raw idea. I don't want someone to think it's a terrible idea or to make fun of me. And we were talking earlier about having really thick skin. If you got to be able to take that criticism, understanding it's not finished. But whatever perspective they give you will allow you to finish it probably better, just because it's a fresh perspective. You're close to it. And you understand every bit of it in your head, but you maybe haven't explained it that well. So stepping away for a short period, even 5 or 10 minutes, coming back to it will reset your mind. Allowing other people to give you input will allow you to open yourself up to those possibilities, and just understand every time you kind of finish it, you can always finish it again. You can always do more. You can always expand upon it until it gets to a point where you're ready to put it out in the world.
This has been the Golden Group Neo Marketing Podcast. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Tell a friend, leave a review, and engage with us on social media. Thanks for listening.